Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is a place where you can discover meditation instruction and also, I hope, a little bit of spiritual wisdom and encouragement, especially during these days when we're at home and isolated due to the coronavirus. So, today, the subject I thought I'd try to tackle, albeit with trepidation, is what is the sacred feminine and how to practice with her. So I am experiencing a little shyness in talking about the sacred feminine, I think for two reasons. First, this is not something that we can come to know through concepts or words alone. And yet, paradoxically, which is quite appropriate given the realm of the feminine is the realm of paradox, paradoxically, we have no other choice but to start with explanation and concepts and words. And the other reason I feel a little shy about describing the sacred feminine is that it's not really an it at all. It is by its nature based on pluralism and multiplicity. So every time I refer to the sacred feminine, or she for short, I hope you'll bear with me due to the limitations of words, and perhaps there's an invitation to feel into what I'm saying and see if it rings true for you. So before I describe what the sacred feminine is, so to speak, I'd love to describe what she is not. And then when I'm done with that, I'd love to explain how to practice embodying the sacred feminine. So as far as what the sacred feminine is not, by feminine or the feminine principle, I'm not referring to something that exists in women or people with a female gender identification versus men or people who have a male gender identification. I think, as Mirabai Starr has recently said, we're all mature enough to acknowledge that there is a broad spectrum of gender identifications, both within each of us, if we're honest, and outwardly with how we present in the world. So the sacred feminine that I'm referring to is something that exists within all sentient beings, all sentience, regardless of our outer forms or the gender identification we adopt. And as I alluded to at the beginning of this, the sacred feminine is not something. And this bleeds more into what the sacred feminine is. I would say that the sacred feminine is an experiential orientation to reality that is embodied and honest and vast. It is more of a capacity than it is a thing, more of a process than something that exists in some sense of finitude. And I think the definition of the sacred feminine that I tend to hover around the most is the sacred feminine is an active willingness to receive reality and to relate to it. It is the willingness to encounter what is. And when we think about that, we could say that meditation, in its sense, is deeply at its core, within the realm of the sacred feminine, it is the practice of encountering and embracing and being with reality. Now, this is really radically different, I think, than our usual tendencies. Um, our usual tendencies when we encounter something in our lives and when we encounter um, reality is, in Buddhist psychological terms, to have one of three reactions to it. So we might push something away, experience some sort of aversion to what's arising. We might grasp onto it for dear life because we perceive it as something incredibly precious. Or we might be ignorant to the arising altogether. We either consciously numb out, or we don't even know what's happening. And these three tendencies or habits that we have of relating to reality, they are based on some idea, some concept about how things are. So generally, when we experience aversion, we have some sort of concept that what has arisen or what we're facing is bad news. There has been we could say, a mental labeling or some sort of idealistic commentary on what has experientially arisen. In the case of something that we are grasping tightly to, there has been some sort of idea, some sort of concept that this thing or this person or this trip or this next job or whatever it happens to be is the source of my happiness. We have ideated about that and projected it upon the experience that has arisen, and so we grasp at it. And as far as our tendency to indulge in ignorance or numbing out, that is kind of like a conceptual blind spot, but not a willingness to embed ourselves with that reality, probably because we don't even know it's there. So when we talk about the sacred feminine, we're talking about an orientation to reality that is radically different than conceiving of how things are and pushing life away from us or pulling it towards us out of some projected need. The sacred feminine is an orientation to reality that is about receipt and receiving nakedly how things are. And this is why it's difficult to talk about it, because it's not a conceptual exercise. It is also not passive. It's an intentional openness to how things are. So when we think about the coronavirus and the stories right now that are circulating about how things are right now, there are many narratives about what lies ahead and what this experience means. And these are important to pay attention to, I think, because they reflect kind of the inner orientation of the collective, and that is the sum total of our individual orientations. So, for example, if we all had an orientation of conceptualizing reality and making it some way, our collective stories or narratives might appear to reflect that. So right now I'm noticing that I'm hearing lots of stories about we will triumph over this coronavirus and we will conquer it and come out better on the other side. And there's nothing, to be clear, to be very, very clear, there's nothing fundamentally wrong or incorrect with that kind of narrative. In fact, it really has its place. I think that can generate an experience of hope and can inspire a certain bravery. But I think that that narrative is a departure from what a sacred feminine narrative might invite us to. So perhaps a narrative rooted in the sacred feminine as it relates to this situation with the coronavirus would be one that is reflective of our willingness to embed ourselves into this experience, not get over it, not go back to normal, not be better or some version of ourselves for it, but it would be a narrative that invites us to experience, receive the inherent multiplicity of what this coronavirus experience entails, to receive it nakedly and to permit it to transform us. It's an incredibly brave and radical way of being. It is a willingness to be within the substance of this experience, to be with the suffering of this experience, to not make it some way, but to see, to not know. And in fact, the sacred feminine is often the landscape of uncertainty is where she shows her colors the most. It is the willingness to be with uncertainty and groundlessness, the willingness to not know, to see directly with the nakedness of experiential awareness how things actually are. So how to practice with this on the meditation cushion? My own teacher, Soni Rinpoche, describes an amazing practice that he calls handshake practice that I will never be able to do justice to or explain the way he does. But if you have a chance to look up videos of Soni Rinpoche discussing handshake practice, I highly recommend it. And I will give a brief summary here. So a sacred feminine approach to meditation would be to rest and receive and encounter and be with whatever arises in your experience. Which is to say, that's what we do in meditation. But in these instructions, these handshake instructions that Soni Rinpoche describes, there's a particular approach that is geared towards permitting us to relate nakedly to experience. So he recommends that we approach experience with 4 things in mind. So the first is to drop our thinking, drop our ideas about how our experience is on the cushion. Drop our ideas about how it needs to be. Drop our ideas about it being bad or good or not important enough to pay attention to, and simply rest in the body with awareness of what's in the body and see what's percolating. And no matter what experience arises, pick one and simply see if you can be with it. And Soni Rinpoche describes that being with something means not indulging it, not ignoring it, not repressing it, and not applying any antidote. It's a very apophatic approach to practice. So these 4 knots I'm going to go through. But being with your experience in meditation first means not indulging it. So we might have an experience of pang in our gut from digestive issues or anxiety. But the invitation would be to encounter that pang and not indulge it, which means not ruminate about what it means, how it is, and kind of it's almost like adding gasoline to the pain and lighting it on fire. We instead stay with the even painful simmers of the coals of the experience that are actually already there. Not ignoring it means not taking refuge in some kind of daydream that's apart from the experience that we're encountering. Not repressing it means not tightening up, that we actually embody some version of aversion and end up positioning ourselves experientially so that we can't feel it all. And not applying any antidote means not thinking to ourselves, if I do this meditation, maybe this experience will go away, or maybe this blissful experience will stick around forever. So by not ignoring, not indulging our experience, not repressing it, and not applying any antidote, some sort of scheme to trick the experience into serving us to do what we actually want to do, be totally pain-free, for example, we're able to encounter the sacred feminine, which is the capacity within us to hold and embrace and experience that which is arising. And I'll end with discussing, what I alluded to at the beginning of this video, that the sacred feminine is all about paradox. And my experience in meditating in this way has been that there is a paradox, that in an active, experiential willingness to receive nakedly whatever is arising, the lines between what is arising and that which is aware, the part of you that has experiential arisings and the part of you that is aware of those and embracing those, they start to blend together and blur. And we could say they begin to be in union. And that is a paradox only in words, but experientially, it's something we each just have to encounter for ourselves. So what this appears from the outside are the qualities that are often attributed to the sacred feminine. Sometimes it appears just to be the utmost tenderness, the willingness to encounter a friend exactly how they are, the willingness to encounter an experience just as it is, the willingness to not make coronavirus some particular thing, dreadful, amazing opportunity, but the willingness to hold all the complexity within that. That can seem like a very tender enterprise. And there's some ferocity to it. There's some daring and boldness and guts for the willingness to relate to what's arising as it is. This is really radically different, this tender ferocity, than what we might see in the day-to-day life of the narratives that are at play out there. So I encourage you, if you're willing to explore more about the sacred feminine, to read Marion Woodman, Sylvia Pereira, Mirabai Starr, and any number of female mystics, knowing that these words can inspire an experiential encounter, which is the capacity of the sacred feminine that is in all of us. So thanks for bearing with me as I trudge through trying to explain what is an experience in words. And I hope that through this, your meditations can be honest and vulnerable and incredibly strong in that sense. The willingness to be with things as they are is the root of spiritual awakening.